afternoon, everyone. Just waiting a couple of seconds for people to get in and get acclimated. You are at the Research Matters Summer Blitz session. And if you are having trouble accessing the QR code, let me share with you the link to our sign-in sheet. Again, this is the Research Matters 2024 Wayne Risa Summer Blitz session. So hopefully you're in the right place. My name is Laura Gabrion. I'm a literacy consultant here at Wayne Risa. I'm looking forward to talking to you about one of my favorite topics. So as we kind of get our mindset around what we're going to be doing today, obviously we'll do a quick connector and we will look at educational research and the benefits of that research, as well as kind of delving into a little case study of our own as we think about how research has been used to influence the way that we teach. And then finally, we'll look at ways to find research and make just a small commitment to steps for success for this upcoming school year. So hopefully that sounds like a good plan for all of you. And let's move on to our connector. So what I want you to think about for a minute here is a time that you've used research to inform your teaching practices. I want you to just think about where you searched for that information. And if you adjusted your practices as outlined in that research, or did you have to make some shifts because that research was great, but you needed to apply it to your own context? And then finally, did you see changes, positive changes, hopefully, in student outcomes? So just kind of take a minute to think through those questions, thinking about where you found research, how you used it, or maybe adjusted it to your context, and what were the outcomes of using that research to inform your teaching practices. Okay, hopefully that gave you enough time. You might still be thinking, and I know Elizabeth has added her thoughts to the chat, that what helps in her room is using PBIS strategies and CBI interventions for students in crisis. And Elizabeth, I don't know if you're comfortable with unmuting and sharing, but have you seen positive changes due to using both of those strategies?
Yeah, absolutely. I work in a center-based program in Wyandotte, and I work heavily on social emotional learning in my classroom with my students. They really need that support. So even just recognizing like triggers, per student, whether it's sensory, a lot of times I work in a high school, so a lot of times it's like, feelings of abandonment from friends and such that can from just like the smallest, little disagreements. They're feeling like, oh my God, I'm being abandoned by my friend. So just even recognizing our own triggers, how to respond to them, and also modeling my staged like situations. I have some students, who need help with coping with like loud sounds or like feelings of stress. So like kind of staging things in my classroom to show them how to handle with stressors has also helped a ton, honestly.
That's wonderful. And Elizabeth, I have one more question. When you read the research, did you end up adjusting, to kind of fit the needs that you had, or did you kind of follow the recommendations verbatim?
I used it more as a per student kind of situation because my students are so vastly different and all of their needs are so vastly different. But it definitely benefited. And even parents in IEP meetings are telling me like, yeah, like my students communicating their needs a lot better. And, it's helping out a lot at home. There's a lot less stressors at home with our child. And it's really definitely helped out a lot.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah.
Kelly, I see your response in the chat that you use organization websites like Southern Poverty Law Center in your teaching of history. So just a quick set of questions. did you, follow anything particularly that you found on that site? If you're willing to unmute and share, did you make any shifts and did you see positive student outcomes?
Yeah, I use websites like Southern Poverty Law Center. I use that one a lot, especially for when we talk about civil rights movement. The textbooks are lacking, and it's, a reputable organization. So I'm able to give them, more information than what we have in the book.
And so, yeah, I think one of the things that I'm, just obviously the two examples so far have been different. One's more behavior oriented, one's more rooted in just content, teaching students more content than what's available. So I think ultimately in looking at, just the the types of sites or articles or organizations that you're seeking out, that's one thing that you obviously want to be cognizant of when you're looking for research that's going to make some shifts in your practices. You want to obviously always be thinking about how that's going to change student growth. Obviously, too, you want that to be positive. But what I think that I wanted to, I guess, point out as we just kind of put our minds around the importance of research is that sometimes it's really great research, but we have to adjust it slightly to fit our context. And I'll give you an example. When I was teaching at a community college, I was attending a professional conference. I went into a particular session and listened to wonderful strategies for getting students to engage in writing more at the college level. But the people presenting were from a four-year university that was probably one of the more prestigious in the country. I loved what they were saying, but I knew to make it work in my own classroom, I needed to make some adjustments because my context was different. So ultimately, I would want us to just be open to the fact that sometimes we get these great ideas, but we need to tweak them a little because they don't fit perfectly into our situation. All right. So just kind of a little bit of a background on research in general. And that background, starting, from the 19th, century, the 1800s, where we saw educational research is being really rooted in observation, data collection. We had researchers like Horace Mann, and we started to see the influence of psychology on learning. So people like John Dewey would, help us understand through his own research and other researchers like him that learning often needed to be experiential. We were in the very beginning of our understanding that students can't just be sitting in front of us as we lecture. And I think we've had a lot of research that supports that in current time. But ultimately, these were the beginnings of seeing that idea that doing had a lot to do with learning. And as we moved into the 20th century, we considered behaviorists like B.F. Skinner, Piaget, Vygotsky, and we really, again, stressed the kind of the feelings and emotions behind the learner, the need to be aware of the developmental stage that learner was in, and also what motivated learners, what helped them learn not only as an individual, but as a group in social settings. In the 20th century, we also saw things like, those methodologies emerging. Was it a quantitative study? Was it a qualitative study? Was it a mixed design? So we saw emphasis that way on how we were collecting data and how we were analyzing that data to come up with the conclusions. And then finally, in the 21st century, we see that emphasis on data-driven instruction that really, again, goes back to some of those 19th century beliefs that learning has to be active, And we see that it needs to be culturally responsive, that it needs to be equitable. There's many considerations that we take into not only what we're looking for when it comes to educational research, but also how we're using that research to actually make various changes in our instruction, to really think about how that research informs us, but also points us to usable strategies. So what I want you to do for a minute here is just consider that evolution. Think about what you notice as you look through that trajectory and what you wonder about. And if I can just get a couple of you to share out. I know I've already had Kelly and Elizabeth share out. So if I could get others that would be willing to do so, that would be wonderful. And you don't necessarily need to share in the chat. If you want to just unmute and share, that's fine. Thank you, Leslie. We're data-driven for testing behavior and how to create small groups, such as in math and reading. I think that's definitely true. And I think we're more cognizant of that data that we collect and how we use that data to consider changes that we can implement in our instruction. Leslie, if you don't mind unmuting, could you tell me some of the data that you're collecting?
Sure. Let's see. We go through and we do the test scores. Then after doing the test scores, we've also been reading every article about how to create small groups, why small groups are important, how to no longer do the types of independent reading that we're used to, what research says about how guided reading should be done. Then we test again, then we measure growth, then we plot the growth. And then we're also evaluated on if the students have mid to high range of achievement. The goal is to have everybody at grade level, and that's just looking at NWEA for our early elementary.
It's great. Leslie, what I really like about what you said is it's not just the scores that you're collecting, but you're looking at outside research that's going to supplement some of the changes that you're making as a group of teachers for the kids.
Yes, and then we are definitely looking at measuring growth, looking at their achievement, but also measuring growth, because we look at where they started. We obviously have a goal of where we'd like for them to go, but then we also have realistic measures or realistic goals in place, and hopes of everybody showing their personal best growth.
It's great.
I guess is the best way to say it.
Yeah, no, it's kind of a cycle of data collection, right? Because you're collecting that data, you're looking at practice, you're looking at research that's going to help you shape those practices, and then you're looking at that data again to see where the growth has happened and where you might need to readjust.
Then I think we're also supposed to collect data with we're individually conferencing, we're small group working. We have the testing for who needs Title I work, who needs more high-end reading support. Then we look at what they're getting, and then based on what they're improving on. So it's a constant, I guess, data collection and reflection. And then you move forward. And then I'll stop talking.
No, I love that, the data collection and reflection. I think that's a good catchphrase. And Constance, I noticed that your district is collecting data from iReady and using that data for small group instruction. And Constance, are you also looking at research, best practices in small group instruction?
Yes. So where I am in Taylor, and iReady is new to me, so I had been using like NWA before, and so they do. Yes, I'm sorry, I'm in a noisy place, but they do use it to collect data for testing and to especially for growth, um, for sure in our district.
I think that's great. I mean, again, I think in both of these examples so far, we're looking at data collected from students, looking at research to support what needs to be changed, and then going back to looking at that data after that after that change has been implemented to really assess whether growth is occurring. And then I have Leslie, you shared that you're collecting and using data from Lexia. Could you elaborate on that at all?
Sure. So in the Lexia program, the students all go through units at their own pace. When they finish a unit, the Lexia program collects what skills that they have done, and you have a skill builder to go back and see which areas they did not earn I guess an acceptable level of understanding. So you go back and practice. And then there's also one that you have hey, practice this on your own. They're sheets that you can print out. So it goes with whatever new skill they were doing where they need additional support, and you can go back and teach them. Or it gives them that little extra practice, like, hey, learned a new thing. So now when you're finished with something else, go have just a little, like a review, and then you're moving on to your next, the level or the next concept. So Lexia has been a program we've done. And then we also do it with the really great reading program. There's a beginning of the year assessment for reading, and then games are created for building the skills that those students need based on the level of their reading. So like everything we're doing is based on data collecting and then teaching.
And that sounds like a lot like the iReady that my district uses. It does have a program where the kids they have daily skills practice with reading and math, and it's adapted to their level, kind of like NWA, but I don't know if NWA has like a program that you can use just like every day. And so the kids are supposed to spend time on it, and it adapts to their level. And it also has games built in. But the only thing is that where I am, we have such a huge attendance problem. So sometimes the kids don't get the daily practice that they need if they're not there. So we're just trying to figure out something to do, like kind of to tackle, like attendance is a big part of the situation that we are facing, where you try to get the kids to practice, but they have to be there in order to get to practice and to build the skills that they need.
That's absolutely right. And again, what I like about what all three of you have said is that you're collecting data, you're looking at practice, and then you're measuring growth, which really, in a way, points to some action research on your own. Oftentimes teachers hear that action research and they think, oh, that's, scary. I feel like I'm back in grad school, and but really in your daily job, you're collecting that data, thinking about what would be best in terms of instructional shifts, and then recollecting to just see if it's working. And then I'm sure if it's not working in some way, you're reassessing. You're thinking, well, if I do a little more of this, or I'm seeing this as still a gap, that you're back at that kind of planning stage, back to the drawing board in regards to what's going to really move students learning forward. All right, so basically, we've kind of talked about, increased student outcomes, both behaviorally and academically. Educational research also, contributes to curricular reforms. We see a lot of that right now with our focus on things like the science of reading, and how we are seeing certain, companies throughout, the available curricular resources as readjusting and making changes to what's being offered to guide student learning to the best of, its ability. We always know that curricular resources are limited. There's not one that will fit perfectly in all ways with our children. But again, they're back at that kind of revision stage where they're trying to accommodate what learners might need most based on comprehensive data, national data. We see it as informing policy changes. Definitely, we talked to in the last few minutes about improved and informed instructional practices. One thing that we didn't talk about, but it definitely research does contribute to targeted professional development. So I'm sure if you've been to other Blitz sessions this summer so far, this month so far, you'll have seen professional development that's research based. That's something that as a RISA, we definitely want to make sure that anything we're talking to you about has that that research pillar behind it. It helps us think about what high quality resources might be for our students. And then just thinking of, from these examples that you've shared, some of you or others are already kind of keeping in mind, what might be some other benefits of educational research beyond these that are listed? Have you personally observed or experienced other benefits? What are some other benefits?
I think for me, like sometimes having other resources or research-based resources, it gives me a little more confidence maybe in my teaching, as far as like, okay, if I know, if I read up on it and it seems like it's going to work, and if I see it working, then it kind of gives me a little boost, even just for me mentally, even though it's helping my students, but I think it's also helping me as the teacher, to be more directed in my teaching. Sometimes it just makes, if it's research based and it works, and it just makes teaching like a little bit easier to a degree, where it's not so complicated. But I think it just has maybe just varying benefits depending on what the research base and the program actually is.
I think
But sometimes the benefit sometimes is like not just for the student, but also for the teacher.
I love that. And I think that sometimes it validates what you were already thinking. Like you kind of know from your experience that if you try something slightly different, that it's probably going to work with students, but you're kind of looking for that validation out there. So that speaks to that idea for me that, your own experiences are going to be reinforced by what research supports. Anyone else?
And I hate to be like just the person talking, but I was also thinking too, sometimes depending on what the research-based material is, um, if it's pretty good, it'll help you also to find materials and like for small groups. Sometimes you kind of like struggle to find something to do for a small group. You may not know, but if it's research-based and it's pretty clear, that's something else it'll help with, just making even like small group work or instruction a little bit easier also, or a little more directed.
It's providing you with some of those strategies. So sometimes you're just looking for the how behind the why, a little combination of it, but it's nice to know the why. We often need to also know the how. And it's an important part of educational research. All right. So what I want us to think about for a minute, those of you who have been involved with this suite of documents in any way throughout the state of Michigan, in your own districts, in your own classrooms, I want us to think about the impact of research on practice. You may know about, I'm hoping that you know about our suite of documents, the essentials. Most of us who have been involved in literacy education know about the literacy essentials. There are also math essentials, there's school and center-wide essentials, and we do have our 612 essentials. So just to give you a little bit of background on this suite of documents, many of you were aware of the Read by Grade 3 legislation that was proposed to begin in 2020. So when it was proposed as a proactive step, MESA and GELN came together and thought, well, we could either wait and see what happens with third grade retention, or we can become, proactive by creating these documents that outline 10 essential instructional practices that are best in classrooms. Now, at the K-5 level, we're looking at every student, every classroom, every day, because our K-5 instructors are typically in self-contained classrooms, so they've got some malleability around the amount of time each day that they devote to instruction in a particular content area. For our 612, we look more at over the course of the unit, that we're going to look at instructional practices, because often, the class periods for 612 are only from, maybe 45 to 50 minutes long, maybe a little bit longer. But ultimately, over the course of a unit of instruction, are you looking at these 10 best practices? In math, the same thing. Our math is geared towards early mathematics. So looking at the same practices across the course of a day. We also have school and center-wide practices, both for K-5 and 612. And those are really about what systems need to be behind the instruction. So what is your leadership team doing? What kinds of instructional resources do you have in the classroom, in each classroom? What kind of professional learning opportunities do exist across buildings and across the district? And then finally, we have coaching practices. So those who are instructional or literacy or math or other content area coaches, whether they're K-5 or 612, what are some of the practices that they need to adhere to? And again, all of these are research supported. They've been, we've got teams of researchers throughout the state that have helped develop these, from Michigan State University, the University of Michigan, the various professional organizations that exist in our state. And there's been task forces made up of all these different people to develop these documents. And what you see on this timeline is you've got, ones that came out in 2016. So right after that legislation was proposed in 2015. But what you see is upgrades to those documents. So, 2016, some of them came out, but they were updated. And so you've got kind of the layout of all of these documents in, the ungrayed out, kind of the bold, showing you when they've been updated and when they became available to the public a second time around or a first time around. So these documents, and I want to make sure, let me stop sharing for just a second so that you've got access to this set of documents from MESA. So if you're at this particular site, you'll see on the left-hand side, and I'll share it for you as well, but you'll see the entire, set of task forces. So if you're looking for 612 disciplinary literacy or early mathematics, you've got the task forces and then their resources, the documents, the school-wide documents, tools to support it. You have the same in early literacy. So you've got the birth to grade 5 early literacy essentials. This is a combined booklet with all of the different, birth to 3 preschool, K3 and 4-5 essentials are included in that. You also have the early mathematics essentials. So just so you know kind of where to go, that link will help you a great deal. But what I want to go back to is just looking at, this suite of documents. Like I said, we've thought long and hard as a state about what's going to best support learning within disciplines, across disciplines, especially in the 612. So what I want you to think about if you've had experience with the essentials documents, where do you see evidence of any of these documents, whichever one you work closely with, or if you just want to take a couple of minutes to look at one of the particular documents and really consider where you've seen evidence of improved practice because of these research supported 10 practices for each grade level. So just take a minute to think about that. Okay, so the loaded question, how many of you are working with or have seen one of these documents before? You could even do a hand raise if it's easier. All right, coaching practices. Leslie, I know you've elaborated before, but do you mind sharing out about those particular practices for you?
Sure. So I've used a coach for classroom management. I've used the coach for support for setting up our reading program, and I've used a coach for understanding better use of manipulatives for first grade. First grade was the only grade that I had not taught, and yet last year was a time that I got to be a first grade teacher. So utilizing the coach for best practices that they had done and knowing the research that had been done and knowing the curriculum we had for our school district, I met with 3 different coaches who were the experts in the 3 different categories. And they modeled for me. We brainstormed what to use and how to use it, why to use it in class. If it puts into perspective, I had 14 out of the 20 qualify for reading support. They were not on reading level. And so having a coach, I didn't feel like I had to do it on my own.
I think and that probably addresses, I think that's kind of what Kyla, I would speak to with, the fact that you've seen the documents, but you haven't personally used them is what Leslie mentioned, the fact that they're all in one spot for you. So it doesn't entail you going into, many articles or many websites that are, promoted by various, organizations, something like the International Literacy Association or something like the National Council of Teachers of Math, but they've compiled it. So it's kind of one-stop shopping for you. And if you look at the documents, you'll notice that the practices are often what you're already doing in class. You know that these are good practices, but for me, what I always look at are the bullets. The bullets help me get a little better because I know that even if I'm doing all of them, there might be some that I'm stronger in than others. And I know that all of them are important. So the bullets help me improve where I need that improvement. Anyone else want to share about whether you've used them or how they've helped, where you've seen evidence of that, or where you are on your journey with these documents?
Happy Monday, everybody. So at the Service Learning District, we utilize them with our MTSS program. And so they're resources for us to support us, to see if we're going the right way, enhancing the tools, the strategies, and interventions that we're trying to implement. So we have access to the website, and thank you for sharing it again. I'm on a new computer, so I'm locking it in on this one. But yeah, we are familiar with these practices.
That's great. And I same as you, they're bookmarked for me. I have a literacy background, so I have bookmarked the literacyessentials.org. But those of you who are working regularly with math, just going back to that link that I shared with you will bring you to, will give you access to the math documents. And the nice thing too, the MESA website also includes various resources that are going to support that. So I'm glad. Yeah, I feel like that and the standards are my 2 bookmarks I go to, I feel like almost every day. And then from Carrie, the school-wide literacy essentials, they've worked hard to, get free books into students' hands and homes all year. especially for the summer. We have strong partnerships. So I love that you talked about that, because the school-wide essentials talk about those systems, right? And the systems extend past the school building or the district buildings. We need those partnerships, and we look for opportunities to build upon those. So for example, in some communities where they've got meet up, eat up throughout the summer, they'll also work together with those opportunities to get curricular material or, enhancement material, things that are going to enrich students, keep them tapped in the summer. Local libraries are another example. There are a lot, but we know that we want to keep kids engaged in learning throughout the school year, in various ways. It doesn't necessarily have to be those skills and drills. Even what we've worked on at RISA through our lit labs, and our STEM fusion programs is really looking at getting kids engaged and motivated and excited about learning. So these are great examples. And again, too, they're thinking about not only the whole system, but the whole child. So it makes it easier for you as an educator than to have to look through a lot of research. But if you are just one of those research, somebody who just likes to dig in and read, don't forget that to find good research, there's a lot of resources out there. Definitely, we've got online databases. Google Scholar is getting better and better all the time, as far as giving you access to research that's not behind a paywall. So you can get right in there. Often the PDF is linked, or maybe it's access to an open source, for example, so you can read that research. Our own Michigan e-library is their database is EBSCOhost, and I think they might have access to ProQuest. If they don't, the Library of Michigan will give you free access to ProQuest. Either way, those are good databases. They're general databases, but they're accessible. They'll get you links to and full text resources, articles, sometimes even ebooks. JSTOR is another good one, and ResearchGate is free. It kind of collects research that's out there and gives educators access to it. We also have wonderful educational sites, Edutopia, Read, Write, Think, the Annenberg Learner, Education Week, and we've got KQED Learning. Now, some of them, again, might require, nominal fees. Most of them are free. And then you've got your professional organizations, and some portions of the sites from our, National Council of Teachers of English or Mathematics, or our Science Teachers Association, or Social Studies, or the administrative end, the curriculum development. Many of the resources on these sites are free, but some do require, a membership fee. You always have the choice to go deeper if you want, and sometimes districts will pay for, your membership in a professional learning organization. We've got our local ones too. We've got MCTE and MRA. We've got MCTM and MSTA. We've got in-house in Michigan organizations that are, factions. They're sites that are based on connections to these national sites, and will provide you with more regionalized professional learning, so you don't have to go all the way to a national professional conference, for example. There's some that are offered for you right here in Michigan. But again, these are great ways to stay in the know, and to grow your own understanding of research. So again, just that question, are there any others that you've used besides this set that I've provided for you? Anything that anyone else has found that you think this is really great? I want to make sure the people in this Zoom room know about it. All right. I'm going to take that as I gave you a pretty comprehensive list here. But if there's other places that you've searched or have looked for, feel free to add those to the chat as just something that your colleagues here in this session can take advantage of. All right, one of the things that I wanted to make sure that you do think about if you regularly go to research articles, and really probably most of you are used to the routine within them. But what we find in research articles is the first part is an introduction and a literature review. So in that literature review, you've got what everybody else, not maybe everybody else, but many, prolific researchers have already said about the topic. So for example, if it's, self-efficacy in student writing, you might find that you'll get kind of the range of research over the last probably 20 years that contribute to our understanding of what builds self-efficacy in students when they attack writing, often a very vulnerable activity for them. And then you'll see the research questions of your authors. So based on all of that existing research, what do they still have questions about? Then you're going to see their methodology. So who were their participants? What tools did they use to collect the data? Where did they collect data? And, kind of what was their window of that data collection? Was it over the course of a year? Was it through, for example, surveys, and they were just sent out, and they had 150 responses? Was it going into classrooms and doing observations? Was it a case study? The next thing that you're going to see is their analysis of that data. So how did they either quantitatively or qualitatively or both analyze what they found? And then you see the results, and the results are really their interpretation of that data. So that whole kind of middle section, parts 2, 3, and 4, are really about the study at hand. So you look at your authors for that particular article, and you think, you realize that middle portion is really what they did in the current study. And then the discussion typically brings back that secondary research, their literature review, and either uses that to validate some of their findings or explain why their findings have diverged from what was found previously. It usually gives you some implications for further research, and some recommendations based on that. And then you'll have the references that they used. So just from my own personal work, in research, what I have found most valuable personally is that literature review. I often want to know what's already been said about this topic and the discussion. I find it interesting to see, based on their research study, where these two kind of coalesce, where they diverge, and the why, and what they recommend for the future. I also go back to that methodology because I'm interested to know how many subjects did they have? How many people participated in the study? Where was the study? So if it was in a rural area and I'm teaching in an urban area, I have to think about that a little bit. Not that I would, discredit the findings, but I might think about how it applies to my context. And then those references have come in handy for me as well, because I think about does help me go back to who supported the research that's in that literature review. And often I want to read some of those articles. So I'm looking back at those as additional research on a particular topic. And then finally, just thinking about what you're going to do. It sounds like a lot of you are collecting, both formal and informal pre and post data, which is wonderful. And you're thinking about how that data is going to drive, your decisions, including your adjustments. You're really integrating a research-based strategy into your lessons based on what you know to be the student's needs. But other ways that you can start, small, and maybe grow that is maybe it's an article study, a book group that you want to begin, just, a small investigation. I think about disciplinary literacy at the 6-12 level, and often just getting an idea about what disciplinary literacy is a great, it's a motivating way to start all of us working in the same direction, is to just engage in a book study and to really talk regularly about what that looks like. What does disciplinary literacy look like in ELA, in science, in social studies, and in math? Attending local, regional, and national conferences, joining professional organizations, other steps, I'll leave that to you to share either via the chat or just by unmuting and sharing. Any other things steps that you've taken personally or that you might encourage a group within your building or district to do. If you want to just share those, like I said, unmute in the chat, whatever works best for you. I'll add PLCs are a great way to dig into research. Obviously reading books or articles on your own, but it's nice to kind of think about that educational research that we learned from our behaviorists. There's really a deep benefit to socially constructed learning. I love that, Leslie, team meetings. I think we were thinking the same thing, whether those are grade level or content area, however you're moving those. And sometimes it's maybe you're trying to implement or investigate a new curricular resource. So it's kind of a multi-disciplinary group that's coming together, various stakeholders in a decision like that. Okay. Oh, I've got a couple additional here. Setting up pre-observation meetings or pre-goal setting with the principal. I agree. Those are great ways to also kind of I guess set that kind of expectation around the learning that you're going to do. Oh, and Caroline added reading apprenticeship. Yes, definitely there are evidence-based approaches to learning that have worked for years and have been proven to be effective. Reading apprenticeship is just one program and set of strategies, but there's definitely other ones out there. So engaging in that kind of learning is also important. We've had a good relationship with Reading Apprenticeship in West Ed for the last few years and have been able to, and again, I'm thinking too of UFly, another kind of research-based approach to early literacy, and we've offered that kind of professional learning for Wayne County educators. So that's a great examples. All right, so as we're closing, because we're getting down to our last 5 minutes, and thank you for adjusting with a few technical difficulties on my end, but we're going to continue these conversations. So one thing that we're going to do over the course of the next school year is a Let's Talk Literacy research series. It's a 6-week series. It's virtual sessions, and we're anyone who registers will receive the Disrupting Thinking, How We Read, Why How We Read Matters by Beers and Probst, who are two excellent, renowned researchers, literacy researchers. So we'll look at articles. We'll look at an opportunity to network and share insights. So if you're interested in kind of continuing this conversation, I'm going to put the link to this slide deck in here, but you can definitely register for this particular session. And as I adjust and send that link out to you, if there's anything that anyone else would like to add before we close out for the afternoon. Well, as I'm sending this link out to you, I appreciate all of you that were willing to share. And even those of you who are just, sitting back and taking it all in, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about research. I love researching, and it always excites me. So if you've got the opportunity to continue on this journey, I would love to have you in the series in the fall. But otherwise, I hope that you have it's a beautiful day out there. At least it looks like that from my window. I hope you enjoy the rest of the day and the remaining days of summer before school starts in the next couple of weeks or in the next week. Have a great afternoon. Thanks so much for logging in.